reference was made to the CHIPS and Science Act. I put out a statement last night, but I think it's important to have a more comprehensive discussion because I know how excited people can get about these types of statements that are made in the arena. And I think what we saw last night was rhetoric in an arena. And I think when you put context to the rhetoric in the arena, you can see how both sides get supercharged. And I think that's a little bit of what we witnessed last night. The reality is that the CHIPS and Science Act that was passed in a bipartisan manner, Republicans and Democrats. Since its passing, there's been dozens of grants that have been made to Republican districts and Democrat districts. The president's specific comments were quite specific, actually, referencing that any funding left should maybe go to the national debt. And then he looked at the speaker and certainly referenced the fact that maybe you should repeal it. The idea that Republicans and Democrats would vote against projects in their district when they voted for the plan, literally in a bipartisan manner, pretty overwhelmingly, is not practical. Micron, specific to the Micron project in our district, Micron literally has their funding agreement. So when the president says, well, it's not funded, I believe he's referencing any money that has not been appropriated. Micron has their funding agreement. They receive funding in benchmarks for the fab in Boise, for the fab in Syracuse by 2028 to be operational, and then the second fab to be operational by 2030. They've also received an investment tax credit, which Secretary Lutnick and members of Congress are looking at ways to extend, but also potentially expand because of how important it is to the industry. I understand rhetoric. I understand rhetoric in the arena. Those of us who get into this business, that's what we live with, and that's what happens to a much smaller scale. Here locally, that happens. But what I will say is I also understand actions. And the reality is that we have been lead agency for the most extensive environmental review process for the state and local in Onondaga County. And our partner is the Commerce Department at the federal level. If this administration did not want to support this project, this administration would not be working with us every day to move the project forward. Pencils would have been down on the environmental review. In addition to that, on Monday of this week, less than 48 hours ago, I met directly with the EPA administrator, Administrator Zeldin. And our conversation was very specific. I gave him a comprehensive overview on not just the Micron project, but everything we are doing to prepare this community to become the Central New York cluster for semiconductor and high-tech manufacturing, to help lead this country on what is a critical national security project. And we talked about ways that we can assure that the Micron project stays on schedule, and also potential ways that the construction schedule could get easier. What types of regulations could get easier to help make it easier for Micron to build the two fabs, but also for supply chain companies to come in the community. Certainly not actions of an administration that does not want the project to move forward. So I think there's rhetoric in the arena, there's actions on the ground. We will continue to work in the process that we're undergoing. There has been no pencils down on the review. The review's moving forward. We're going to have a draft environmental impact statement on the biggest project that's been studied in the history of the country in March, and we're in March, and we'll continue to move forward related to that. The work's being done on the site to construct. The work is being done with critical partnerships related to workforce. The work's being done in supply chain recruitment and to repatriate these jobs. All of this effort is consistent with what the president has done. Specific to TSMC, I think that the president was trying to make a point. The president was highlighting the fact that he secured an additional investment from TSMC, and there's no grants with it. TSMC is very sensitive to tariffs. that probably helped influence their decision to do more in our country. I think that the president should be congratulated with that investment. That's a big deal. And so I think overall, I think you had a little bit of rhetoric. We all know that the president thinks he could have negotiated a better deal. We all know that some of the regulations that come with the CHIPS and Science Act, there is an appetite both in Congress and in the semiconductor industry to see some of those regulations go away. And I think you had a little bit of a tit for tat that he was able to land more semiconductor investment without any grants, and the previous administration landed a lot of semiconductor investment with grants. I think that's what you saw a little bit yesterday. Happy to take questions.
Ryan, can you just give any more specifics about what Lee Zeldin said specifically to Micron?
I think the administrator and I had a great conversation. We talked about, it was really a great briefing, Tim, because there's more than just Micron. There's the wastewater project that we're doing that is going to physically start construction, and certainly looking for different avenues of financial support to help with that project. We're always looking for partners. Talking about the ability to bring that second pipeline from Lake Ontario with the Water Authority, talking about doing that, what it will mean for our region, the fact that we'll be able to compete for investments like high-tech manufacturing jobs like this for generations to come, which was really, really interesting to the administrator. And his way was like, all right, like, we need points of contact. We need to make sure that we stay on time. I have no complaints about all of our agency partners in the environmental review process. They're doing a lot of work. They were all here just a couple of weeks ago working on this. So the idea, I get the rhetoric. I get you got to report it. I get you got to ask these questions. But there's the rhetoric in the arena, and if you look into it and do a little bit of an analysis of what happened right before that, unprecedented decision by leaders of the Democratic Party not to walk out with the President of the United States, very partisan acts, to think that this president wouldn't maybe have a little bit of fun at their expense and jab them back. I think you saw a little bit of that last night. And so, there is zero signs on the ground, people actually doing the work, that this administration doesn't support the project. Easiest thing the administration could do, pens down. Then there's no project.
County Executive, the president has shown that he's not shying away from taking away funding from other entities that have already been allocated by Congress and approved at the federal level. Why is this project different? What's stopping him from doing that with Micron?
Well, I think I related some of the most ridiculous things the federal government is spending money on, and it's easy to take that away.
We're talking about nonprofits though here locally. We've heard from the Syracuse Community Health Center about their concerns. So
everybody's got concerns, and there's politicians who are certainly drumming up concerns too for their own political advantage. So what I would say is that there's a ton of waste in the federal government. It's been highlighted. That's easy to cut. What this is a national security project, Connor. Look at that's what it is. We are the American memory technology company, Micron. Memory technology that drives AI, drives 5G, drives all the technology in all of our weapon systems and radar systems. And you saw how the Chinese government, right after the president's talking about rebuilding ships to help make us more competitive with our naval fleet, which is critical. And at the same time, the Chinese government that is really raising the temperature in their rhetoric, right? Micron needs to make these chips for our country. They need to make them in America. The White Pine Business Park is the only place the project could happen. We proved that when we went through the greatest site selection process that any community's ever gone through.
The president's made it clear that he does want chip manufacturing to be happening in America. Is there any concern, given that he's directed the Commerce Department to review what's been approved under Biden, that it could be advantageous for him to take this project somehow and move it to a swing state or a Republican state that does well for him?
There isn't sites. Literally isn't sites. You wanted to. We have the best site in North America. Literally, there's not a site that this project could go to and meet the timelines the company needs. The company needs to be making this technology by 2028 at scale for their clients, their customers. Remember, this is a business, right? The Department of Defense is one of their customers, right? That's important, right? But they have customer orders that need to be fulfilled. You can't just start over. And so that's the reality. Micron's going to be naming construction team partners this year. They're going to be, we're going to be going through a review process, and that process is going to be completed towards the end of this year, and the project's going to start, and people will start seeing shovels in the ground. You can't just restart that for the good of the company and the good of the country.
Your perspective on the on-the-ground status, I think, is important. It helps balance what is the rhetoric. But rhetoric matters too. The president attacking a project that means so much to so many people, is it something you condone?
The president was attacking legislation, not a project. And the president thinks that there's elements of that legislation that are bad. If you ask the companies today, they would agree with him on that, right? But
they didn't say it was bad when they were in front of President Biden last year.
They didn't, because that's what the Biden administration wanted, right? That's when the boss wants that usually the boss gets what the boss wants. And so, I think the reality is that some of those regulations, which won't impact this project, by the way, because the New York State incentives, basically, to get those incentives, you need to do the same things. You could see some regulations change. I don't think the industry, I know the industry well. I go to every industry conference. I meet with every industry professional. Our industry and our community are connected and tied together for this, for really ever moving forward. I would say that the talking about the CHIPS Act, the way that the president talked about it, is not helpful. I wouldn't be here this morning talking to you if he didn't bring it up. But at the same time, I don't think that the grants that have already been secured and signed and appropriated are in jeopardy.
Can't someone get to this president and say, stop the chaos?
I don't know if it's chaos, Andrew. It creates a ripple effect for us, right? I think overall, you're talking about a national audience and a national constituency, and I think 75% of the people in this country liked that speech last night. That's what all the data shows from left-leaning news outlets. So now, the one thing we're talking about is what it matters the most to us to clarify, right? So I think overall, everybody just needs to take a breath. These projects, right now, there's 3 administrations in charge of these projects at the federal, state, and local level. It's the Trump administration, the local administration, and the McMahon administration. And we're all going to work together, and we're going to create a cluster for the semiconductor industry here in Central New York. That's what's going to happen.
Do you still plan to reach out to, House Speaker Johnson, anyone in Congress to kind of reinforce the points you're making now, and just to make sure, okay, that that Congress isn't going to unravel this in any way, that even Trump pressures them?
Yeah, Scott, so just do the math, right? Democrats aren't going to vote against the CHIPS Act, right? And so then just some simple math right here in New York, there is at least 4 congressional members who are not Democrats that are benefiting from this in their districts. They're not voting against it either. There's no votes there. You aren't getting 60 votes out of the United States Senate to vote against the CHIPS and Science Act. Okay? Todd Young in Indiana, the author, isn't going to vote against his Hynix facility, right? Cornyn and Cruz in Texas aren't voting against their projects. Crackwell out in Idaho isn't voting against his project, right? Georgia senators, name these senators, North two GOP senators, they got projects, right? They're not voting against it. So it's really it's rhetoric in the arena. And, what we're doing, the second the agency puts pencils down on the review, then I'm concerned, then I'm gonna make a lot of noise. And then, I'll be in DC having these conversations. I've talked to House members. I met with House members this week, very supportive, very supportive. This project is gonna transform upstate New York counties, Republican and Democrat counties.
It's interesting to see House Speaker Johnson, having been here in November, talk about repealing the Chip and Science Act. He clarified that very quickly, that that's not exactly what he meant. But then he stood up and applauded to the president last night.
Yeah, I think if you understand, again, the specifics, one, that's the arena, right? The Speaker of the House isn't gonna not applaud his teammate,
He
right?
could choose not to.
Well, that's not gonna happen, Andrew. Let's be practical here. That's not gonna happen. But two, the green energy, renewable energy requirements in the Chips and Science Act isn't good for a district in Louisiana, right? Well, Speaker represents Louisiana, natural gas, oil, right? So he naturally didn't like those elements that the Biden administration got in. So there's all, you got a lot of, the House represents different districts, they have different interests, right? It's very hard to get all of them along the same path, especially within, the margins that you have here. But look at the open house seat, which will be Elise Stefanik's seat. They have Wolfspeed in that district. They have Rome Labs in that district. That will likely be a Republican. That Republican will not support repealing that. They can't, right? So these are all things that let's break down the practicality. It's rhetoric. Here's what's really happening on the ground. How do I know it? Because we're leading it.
I do think it's helpful just at this point to remind people what is absolutely guaranteed in law and what is still kind of promised beyond that. 2 fabs versus 4.
Correct.
A certain amount of money. Could you just remind the community what is absolutely guaranteed at this point?
Yeah. So the 4 fab project is the project. The 4 fab project is what is being studied in the environmental review. Related to the local and state incentives, these are incentives based off jobs, right? So if you had a scenario where Micron built 2 fabs and they didn't build a 3rd and 4th fab, they would be incentivized based off of the jobs there. All that is guaranteed related to the federal grant is the first phase of the project, which is the fab completed in 2028 and operational, and then a fab completed and operational in 2030. So that doesn't mean that Micron won't build the 3rd and 4th fab. That's what they're literally studying for right now. That just means in the federal deal, that's what was in the federal deal.
Are those dates part of the deal?
Those dates are part of the deal.
Are there legal guarantees there? There's no backing out of that?
Related to Micron,
Yes.
Micron would need to get an extension from the federal government to get any sort of movement on that, which I don't think certainly. I know that in conversations with the Commerce Secretary, all these conversations are, how do you go faster, right? How do you go faster? So going backwards isn't in Micron's interest or the country's interest.
The Department of Commerce is legally bound, going the other direction?
That's a contract. Yeah, again, that's what, you can, some of these contracts, I don't know a lot of the contracts that were referenced, so some of them, but these are, I know how extensive this contract was negotiated over time. It took a long time to negotiate that. So certainly, there's obligations by both sides, the United States government and Micron.
Micron is obviously very careful when they make a public statement, and they're lucky to have you to stand up here as often as you do for them. Have you spoken to them in the last 12, 13, 14 hours since the president's comments?
I have.
And what's their read on it?
Moving forward, we'll talk to your team later today. Yeah, there's a lot of work going on.
They're not worried.
No, I think you always look at the rhetoric in a public arena. If you're a private sector company, you want to try to avoid that arena as much as you can, right? You want to do business. So certainly, I think any company, unless they're being highlighted for such a positive thing, TSMC highlighted last night for the president, great win for the president. But the other piece, that TSMC got Chips and Science money for the first 2 fabs that they're doing in Arizona, right? So I think overall, Micron is working very closely with the administration to get this done, to support AI, to support the national security, all these different things that are happening. You need memory chips. And you need American memory chips.
Micron executives aren't panicking the way some lay people might be today, is what you're saying.
No, they do this every day, right? And they, again, there's clear signs that if clear signs happen, I think there would be cause for concern. None of those signs have happened, and I think you had rhetoric in the arena, and nothing. Everybody's still going to go today.
You keep mentioning rhetoric in the arena. When should people take the president at his word?
If you saw the Commerce Department, the EPA, Army Corps of Engineers say we can't work on this project with you anymore.
And you've heard no indication that that could be the direction that we're headed, even though there's a. What do you make of the Commerce Secretary reviewing what was agreed to under Biden?
They should. They should. And if there's ways that you can strengthen and expedite these projects happening by cutting a regulation, that's their job. That's their job.
Do you know, I think President-elect Trump at the time tweeted something about moving projects along quicker,
Faster.
and I know that was part of the conversation.
The same day, you'll remember that, it's the same day Micron signed their federal deal, the president tweeted that any project over $1 billion, he gave an endorsement of the Micron deal, any project over $1 billion, we're going to cut through red tape, build baby build, I believe might have been the quote. So
It's dangerous to start reading his tweets out loud.
but it's he's got a lot of material. So but I think overall it's that there's no accidents, right? The day Micron signs it, he does that, right? He doesn't call out Micron, but how many $1 billion plus projects do you have, right? So there's no accidents in life, Andrew. And I think again, we know that the Commerce Department is supportive. We know the EPA administrators, literally, how do we get this done? How do I help you here, here, and here? How do I get the Army Corps?
Well, that was my question, is based on what Trump said then and your meeting this week, I'm wondering what specifically came up about moving the project faster.
With the administrator, I'm gonna have direct points of contact with his team that I can keep them briefed.
Is there, I mean, I know we hear about the owls, we hear about, the months you kind of came. Is there something specific that's really keeping you behind?
So we're so far down the traditional environmental review process, and I know it doesn't feel like it, right? I understand that, right? That there's really nothing they can do for this process. We're too far into it, right? We're entering the red zone now, right? We're on the 25-yard line, going into the red zone. But when you look at supply chain development, when you look at the infrastructure projects, the ability to look at ways to help streamline some of these projects, so those are being put on hold or on task. When you look at creating this cluster, and you look at the next project, right, whatever that is, there'll be more. Then I think having these partners vested with you is really, really important.
Of course, it's all that spot for all those folks that don't think it's ever going to happen anyway.
Yeah, they're out there, right? That's a mindset that has been in this community for 40 years, 50 years, and certainly if you dislike the president and you live here, you're going to hold on to this comment and you're going to love it and you're going to wrap it around you like a sweater. And the only way we're going to be able to change that opinion, at least temporarily, will be when we got shovels in the ground and we're building. And even then, they'll be on to the next thing that they don't like. That's how they like. It's just what it is.
Still scheduled for fall.
Yeah, we have we expect a big dropping of the DEIS to our teams in March, and that is really critical. Then we will begin our work, our reviews, and then eventually there will be public comment, and the public will see all the mitigation strategies and be able to put in their comments. And then we'll take a hard look at those comments and is there anything we missed? How do we address these concerns? And then you get to your final document, and then eventually a record of decision, and then we'll probably have that done before our dear friends, the Indiana Bat, are probably still hanging around a little bit, and we'll probably have to wait a little bit, and then once they're awake and can fly away or done mating or whatever they're doing, we will start knocking down some trees. But I do think the rest of the country thinks the fact that the Indiana bat's slowing down a national security project, I do think the rest of the country thinks it's the most ridiculous thing they've ever heard of.
Just to clarify, this March, everything before a public comment period is completed with respect to environmental reviews?
The draft environmental impact statement. So what that's our first. Micron and all their consultants have been studying wetland mitigations for the wetlands. They've been studying impacts on community, impacts on traffic, all these things. We're going to get our first. We did a PDEIS, which is very unusual, but we did that so that we could start direct engagement earlier because this is a really important schedule. And certainly we're going to see the product on. Our professionals, Commerce's professionals, are going to study, fact check what they've given us. We're going to work together to get that ready. And then once we're all comfortable, it's going to go before the public for public comment period. And then there's going to be, certainly, the public is going to have interest, they're going to make comments, they're going to have questions, and then collectively those comments will be addressed, questions will be answered, and then you move from the draft environmental impact statement to the environmental impact statement. Once you've gone through that, then you go through a record of decision.
And that satisfies local, state, federal?
Correct.
Speaking of expensive projects that attract rhetoric, the county
It's got away with this one, huh?
the county legislature took another vote related to the aquarium yesterday. Would you just brief us from your perspective on where construction stands, where contracts with operators stand, just kind of the overall status from your end?
Yeah, and I think, I think we've seen, look, I just spent the first 20 minutes talking about one of the biggest projects in the history of the country, right? So our teams, we get busy and we could probably do a better job keeping, what is generic details, get them out quicker related to. We went through an RFP process for an operator of the facility a while ago. We won that process. That rollout kind of got slowed down because we had to, as part of getting the construction costs down, we had to extend the construction timeline. So that probably is why we didn't roll out it before, is because they would have had to have been operating later on this year to get going, but it's not, now the construction is delayed. So
Basically, you didn't need the operator as soon as you initially need the operator.
Yes, and so we probably dropped the ball there talking about that because it's a good thing. We had a private operator, operates the St. Louis Aquarium, was involved with our teams on design. The design team was an international firm with CNS engineers who won that before. We're going to work to try to get some more of what the designs look like for the public to see as we're closer to the project now. We have awarded the contracts related to the project. Again, this is essentially a $100 million project. Certain things could happen within a contract, or it could get a little bit later. Things could happen in the contract, it could get a little bit more, right? So what we said from the second this was getting approved, and go look in the minutes, is that if we understood there was going to be construction increases, but what we said is that we will look for alternative sources than new local dollars, meaning we would look for state resources, federal resources, private sector resources, naming rights, and or old grants that have been sitting around on the books for years that can be repurposed, right? And so what we did then from the $85 million local appropriation, we had ARPA funds that were lost revenue, so they can be used for any county purpose, that we had to have earmarked by December of last year. We appropriated those funds, earmarked them by December of last year. That left a gap. Our approach then was to go ask for basically the same approach that we've always asked for projects related to when we did the construction of the ballpark, related to when we did the galleries construction for the library. Go create a project, allow us basically to borrow money from ourselves at a 0% interest rate, and we will bring in the revenue for the project. That approach made some legislators uncomfortable. We then changed the approach and said, allow us to accept private sector donations from the Aquarium Foundation and allow us to go and sell naming rights for multiple different things at the aquarium. And we will use that money to help fill the gap, as well as the same types of resources we'll still look for, related to other funding or other certainly old projects that could be transferred over. So that's where we were. The legislature took a vote. I know there was questions a bit, really, I think, kind of about does the foundation have to disclose, anonymous donations? One, it's illegal for them to do that. So people should look at that. The Supreme Court already ruled on that. They don't need to do that. No foundation does. But two, there hasn't been anonymous donations. Literally what's being raised right now is there's about 20 different naming rights opportunities, and literally that's what's being sold. And everybody will know who those are when you come to the aquarium on opening day, and there's beautiful naming rights and there's beautiful plaques. And some of them, if they are ready and they want us to talk sooner, we will, right? But literally there has not been anonymous donations. Ironically enough, and I know, Andrew, you're a basketball fan, you'll love this. When people are suggesting that anonymous donations don't happen, literally the next day, the Syracuse NIL received a $1 million anonymous donation. Hilarious. So I think overall, we're happy the legislature voted, happy to do that. We're going to get quite a bit of this money that will get in to help support the project. We continue to look for other resources as well to help do it. I've always said we've had some old grants that could go to this that have already been appropriated. I don't necessarily want to move that money over, but if we have to from a timing standpoint, because we got $1 million sponsorship here, but it's $250 this year, $250. So from a timing standpoint, if we have to, we will. But overall, we're happy the legislature gave us that flexibility. And the project, as you know, is well underway. You're going to really start seeing things flying there. And certainly, I think people will get more and more excited about it as they see it going up.
How are the conversations with sponsors?
Good. I mean, part of it is the rhetoric back and forth, and not understanding the funding model. People want to make sure before they have a deal they're going to be sponsoring something that's going to be there. So I think people feel better now.
What is actually being built right now at the site, and then when is it scheduled, expected to open?
It's going to be complete next year. I would say the September, maybe August, if we're lucky, timeline. And what you're seeing now go up are, again, we're going to go do, we'll probably go do, a site, visit, and we'll probably invite you to come with us. But I think the actual buildings that hold a lot of the tank infrastructure is what's going on right now.
How much have you secured so far in donations?
In pledges,
Yeah.
we've had about $3 million in pledges secured.
And you have 85 already allocated of local
Yeah.
dollars?
Yeah, the best way to look at it is this. There's essentially $92 million between the local and the ARPAs. Remember, in county government, we don't have, these aren't line item approvals. The legislature approves a number. And out of that number, each year you have to operate. We've said we're not putting any new local dollars in this. There are certainly consistent old dollars from years ago of money that's sitting around that can go to this if it needs to be as well. But our goal is to go raise the money. A big naming rights deal, similar to what we got at the amphitheater, will cut that number really, really close. And then unlike the amphitheater where you got, it's used 25 times a year, it's one building, right? You got different naming rights opportunities there. But we have numerous exhibits within the facility, numerous jewel tanks, numerous shark tanks, things like that have real upside value too as well. And one of the things with the aquarium, outside of what makes this probably really valuable for a major naming rights sponsor, is you'll have the people coming, but if you look at where it is on Bear and 81 and where Destiny is, the actual value, how a lot of these are done is how many signs of sight happen, and that's certainly a really, active piece of property over there.
Do you have a round number for how much old money is lying around that could be used?
I don't have that necessarily available, Tim, but certainly there's a lot of old money lying around, right?
A lot.
Yeah, so like I've said, I've been consistent since day one that, if it's already old appropriated money where this purpose is allowable, those are options.
85 of local tax dollars, then about 7 of ARPA, if I'm doing the math right,
About that, yep.
give or take, and then you're hoping to fill the gap to 100 with donations, and then you'll take more on donations if you can.
Yeah, I think that's what, and by donations, these are really naming rights deals.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, there will be some people that'll be like, okay, like I wanna do this, I wanna do that.
$20 doesn't
But-
buy you much on them.
Yeah, most of this will be naming rights.
Back to the White Pine. Do you have a specific ask of the feds for funding for any of the infrastructure related to that?
No, we have congressional earmarks that start up, so we'll put in money for our wastewater project. We'll put in money for maybe some supply chain support. We'll work directly with the Trump administration as well, trying to, garner support, but also in their dealings, if they have opportunities they see where they can be helpful, certainly we'll need to do that as well.
I do have one more question. What's expected of Micron in order to actually get reimbursed with the money that's been promised to them? Is it one lump sum once construction's done? Is it a phased payback?
I haven't seen the contract, Andrew. The benchmarks that I think have been, shared publicly are related to operational. You're operating, you're making a product on this, this quarter, this year, right? I think that's what's.
So a really big payment once they're operational.
Yeah, these are big payments, right?
At what point do you start sourcing animals for the aquarium?
So it's a great question. We will begin probably identifying and working out the arrangements with the necessary marine facilities and marine life where you would get the animals probably towards the end of this year, and certainly beginning of next year, working through those arrangements.
Do you have any ideas that you can share with us?
There's-
What's coming?
Yeah, I think you're going to see, you're certainly going to have a freshwater element to it, which I think is important to really highlight kind of the amazing ecosystems here in New York State, but also to help tell the story of the cleanup of Onondaga Lake. This is a tributary of Onondaga Lake, and in 1990, I don't think anybody would believe you if you said, there's going to be a loop-to-lake trail, an amphitheater on the lake, and an aquarium on its tributary right next door. I don't think anyone would believe you. And so we want to highlight that, but really there's going to be a lot of jewel exhibits, interactive exhibits like you see, shark tanks, and other things for these saltwater exhibits that really will draw make this not like a local regional zoo, but more will be a tourism draw.
Just want to clarify real quick from a few comments ago. Have you not seen the federal contract that Micron has?
I haven't personally read it. No, I've been briefed on it by all my teams and my lawyers, but yeah.
Do you have the ability to?
I don't know. I don't know the right legal answer, if that's proprietary to the federal government, Micron, if they would share that with me or not. We know what the benchmarks of the deal are, because they've talked about them.
All right.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for organizing this.
It was helpful.